Well, I hope that I hope you've had a good day today. I hope your day hasn't been bad. It's been very rainy, muggy outside, so maybe that'll clear up in the next couple days. But if you are sick or hurting, we certainly want to let you know that number one, we love you, but number two, please let us know so we can hopefully do the number one and pray for you. We don't have any announcements tonight, so we can go ahead and jump straight into where we left off last week. You might remember that we're now studying the book of Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes is a very difficult book and, a very depressing book to read. In fact, you might remember, like we talked about last week, that if you have ever wondered what life without God would be like, Ecclesiastes is a good book to read because what we find out, I'm not spoiling the book. We've all read the book. We know how the book ends. What we find out is that God is the only one that can bring complete satisfaction to our lives. He's the only one that can provide our lives with true meaning and purpose. But what we saw last week in chapter 1 is that, all is vanity. That is how the book starts out. Vanity of vanity, says the preacher. All is vanity. And we saw that one depressing factor about the world, or one depressing fact, I guess, at least as it's portrayed in the book about the world, is nothing appears to change. The world is the same as it has always been, and it will continue to be the same as it always has been. Now, if nothing changes, that is to say that the present doesn't differ from the past and the future will not differ from the present, well, how is it that seems to prove to the author that life is meaningless and has no purpose? Well, I'm sure we can see there's no change. We're just stuck in this vicious cycle that we call life. Everybody goes through it and then we die. And we saw that we're given several reasons for why it's believed that the earth does not change. But then we got down to verse 12, and here's where we really hear from Kohelet. I, the preacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem, and I have applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. Now, we move and we learn that the author is sort of taking an exploration. He wants to find out, is there anything on earth? Remember, we've restricted our study to earth and to earth alone, but is there anything on earth that can give my life meaning, or is there anything on earth that I can find that would ultimately give my life a purpose? And the author says that he tested wisdom. Now, this expression, I applied my heart to seek and to search out, this really communicates to us that this is a very personal study. He's deeply devoted to what he's doing. He's very ambitious. He wants to see if he can find an answer. But notice that his entire test is guided by or through wisdom. Okay, so while he evaluates all these different types of things that he's going to evaluate on his exploration of life, he just doesn't do it blindly. It's not like he's giving no thought to what he's doing. He has the ability to fully analyze what he is doing and fully draw a sound conclusion since his study is guided by or through wisdom. Now notice what is said, all that is done under heaven. Now, we're familiar with the expression that is already been used in the book, under the sun. And we know that communicates to us, everything on earth. under heaven rather, seems to be synonymous with the expression under the sun. So again, we are talking about things on earth. Now notice what is said in verse 13 also. It is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. So this exploration that the author is about to take is a task that has been given to him by God, and he is not happy with God because of it. In fact, it seems to be an evil task. The author's view of God doesn't seem to be one that is very reverent or one that we would hold today. Verse 14, I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and striving after the wind. Now, I think how verse 14 begins is particularly relevant to our discussion for a number of reasons, but the main reason being this. While the author is setting out on a quest to find meaning in this life, he is doing it, notice how? By personal experience. Okay, this isn't, he isn't going to somebody and having somebody else tell him about the experiences that they've had. He himself is experiencing it. It's not some special revelation that has been given to him by God. He is witnessing these things, experiencing these things himself, and because of that, he thinks that he is going to be able to draw a sound conclusion. Now, notice what we've already said. His exploration is going to be guided by wisdom. Now, he surpasses everybody in wisdom. Okay, if he surpasses everybody in wisdom and he is taking this exploration and he is doing that through personal experience, what are we to assume about the conclusion? That anybody else can also take the same exploration and they should be able to arrive at the same... Okay, they're not going to be able to refute it. Maybe I shouldn't say they would arrive at the same conclusion. Okay, that's probably not accurate, and I shouldn't have said that. What is accurate, however, is his point is nobody should be able to argue against his conclusion. That's what I should have said. It sounds a lot better and to say that than how I previously said that. Now, I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and striving after the wind. We're going to see this expression, striving after the wind, a lot in the book of Ecclesiastes. Now, what in the world does striving after the wind communicate to us? Well, number one, it communicates an act that is very taxing, okay? If you go out striving to, pursue the wind, you are going to continue to have to do it because you will never catch the wind, okay? So, number one, the act is exhausting. Number two, it is ultimately meaningless and fruitless because nobody can grasp the wind, right? Well, that seems to be how life is. Life is very taxing, life is very tiring, and it produces very little to nothing at all. Now, we're given this proverb in verse 15. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. Now, if we're talking about, if we're talking about how the world is set up, in the sense that the world can't change, this is very depressing because the world is crooked. It's in need of being made straight, but God is the one who made the world, and He made the world how He wanted to make the world. And if He made the world crooked, there's nothing that a person can do to make it straight. By the same token, that's what we would find out with what is lacking cannot be counted. Verse 16, I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom. Now notice this. How great is your wisdom? Surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. So he is the perfect candidate to take this exploration, to really find out if there is meaning to this life. And I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know mad folly. Okay, we have to ask this question after we read that. He is going to test wisdom and see if that gives him any meaning. He's also going to test folly. Now, does it seem particularly wise to test folly? You know, if you have wisdom, why in the world would you need to test things that would be considered foolish? You know, wouldn't you be able just to cross that off the list? Well, maybe he's testing these things that are foolish to figure out what is truly wise. Okay, maybe that's an option. So in order to be wise, you have to know what is foolish. And then maybe this is just to point out to the reader, you know, have no doubts. You know, I've covered it all. You know, not only have I given my attention to wisdom, but I've also given my attention to foolishness. Now, the result of that is rather striking. I perceived that this also is but striving after the wind. Hold on here, Kohelet. You're telling me that you gave your attention to wisdom, but you also gave your attention to foolishness, and you're telling me that both of them in the end are vexing on the soul and the emotions, and they profit very little, if nothing at all. And Kohelet would tell us, yes, that is what I am telling you. Now, that's rather surprising and rather startling, maybe, but we're given in verse 18 maybe what we're to think of as another proverb. For in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. So according to Kohelet, wisdom and knowledge is not everything that it is cracked up to be. It can be very taxing for a person to increase in knowledge. Can make people miserable, in fact, according to chapter 1. Now we move on to chapter 2, and I'm going to say, sometimes I'll slip up and I'll say Solomon. That just gets into, is Solomon really the author of Ecclesiastes? I'll probably just say Kohelet, and that leaves it open to maybe that's Solomon, maybe it's not Solomon. But we move now from, testing wisdom and folly to testing pleasure, okay? So wisdom and folly can't bring us meaning in life, according to Kohelet. So what about pleasure? Well, what we notice is he starts out with one of the most sensual pleasures, and that's the consumption of alcohol. But let's read verse 1 before we jump into that. I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. But behold, this also was vanity. Now, he tells us what he's going to test, but before he, really nails down the specifics of what he's going to test, he goes ahead and he goes ahead and tells us his conclusion. And what is the conclusion? Again, this is vanity. It is empty. It provides us with nothing. Now we're really going to get a breakdown after this of what exactly he tested. What exactly does pleasure refer to? I said of laughter, it is mad, and of pleasure, what use is it? I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine. Now notice again, this is talking about the consumption of alcohol. My heart still guided me with wisdom. Now that's interesting, because what a lot of people, when it comes to discussions about drinking alcohol, and people don't want to think about, somebody being intoxicated, what they've said here is, yes, the author does test himself with wine, and he does indulge in that, but he doesn't do it to the point that he becomes intoxicated, because notice what that verse says. My heart still guided me with wisdom. And if his heart's still guiding him with wisdom, then he has to be able to attain his rational abilities. And if he's going to be able to retain his rational abilities, he can't be drunk, and therefore, he's not drinking to the point of intoxication. Well, I'm not so sure that's what that's saying. Okay, I think even if he did drink to the point of intoxication, after the fact, he would be able to analyze that act with wisdom and determine whether that passes the test or not. But that's probably a discussion for another day. Now, we move to verse 4, and this is what we read. Well, I guess we can finish the rest of the verse. And how to lay hold on folly till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. Now, notice that. Humans spend a great majority of their time in life trying to figure out what is truly worthwhile. Now, why is that interesting? Why do we need to point that out? Because notice what he says here. Till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. Life is short, but humans spend a majority of their life just trying to figure out what's worthwhile. So, we'll talk about that later. Notice verse 4. I made great works. Now, you might, if you want to draw a comparison to Solomon, Solomon did a lot of great things. He built a lot of great structures. So I guess we could draw that parallel here, and we would be fine in doing so. But I want us to notice what is said. I made great works. Okay, so as far as pleasure is concerned, this is pleasing self. Okay, and what we'll continue to read is all his activities that concern pleasure are about pleasing self. It's never about pleasing others. Okay, so he is really indulging self here. Well, I made great works. Okay, what kind of great works are we talking about? I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made gardens and parks and I don't know what exactly we're referring to when we talk about parks, but it seems to be referring to some sort of enclosure. But I made myself gardens and parks and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves. Now, he's building all these great structures, and he's very industrious, I guess we could say, very clever. He seems to be very smart. We see the wise builder here. I mean, he creates ways in which he can water the vegetation that he has planted. But not only does he indulge in building, but he indulges in acquiring male and female slaves. Now, these are male and female slaves for himself. We know that if a person is going to build great structures, it's going to take a good majority of people to maintain those structures. So he needs male and female slaves, and had slaves who were born in my house. Now, that's an interesting detail, because we might remember from the law that if you acquire a slave after so long, you have to get rid of that slave. That slave is able to go free if they choose to do so. But while they are under your care, if they have a child, that child is your child, so that's just an interesting detail. Well, he says, I also had great possessions of herds and flocks. Now, herds, would refer to maybe several different types of animals, but we're probably to think of cattle, and obviously flocks were to think of like sheep and goats and, lambs, that sort of thing. More than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. Look how great I am. Look how I sought to please myself. I had what I wanted. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the sons of man. Now, that's where we'll pick up next week. We're at our time, so we'll finish, hopefully. I don't want to say we'll finish because I don't know if we will or not. We will continue chapter 2 next week. I hope everything is going good in your life right now. I can't wait to see everybody Sunday. God bless.